Ole Miss takes on the Florida Gators tonight, but first, one last look at a top 5 win against Tennessee. We're going to bring in Michael Katz from the Northeast Mississippi Tupelo Daily Journal to tell you all about it.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm Steven Willis from the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. We're going to bring in Michael Katz in just a second from the Northeast Mississippi Tupelo Daily Journal. It's been a big week in Ole Miss sports. There's not a lot going on, but Ole Miss is winning games and moving up seed lines and having very, very important results go their way. We're bringing in Michael Katz. Michael, the Tennessee game, that was the hardest that I've seen Ole Miss basketball play this season.
Without question. I mean, there were a lot of moments where it seemed like it might get away from them. And like Tennessee just kept making their threes, and Ziegler was just this. I mean, his passes were just so crisp. And there were so many moments where I was like, oh no, is this the moment where Ole Miss slips up? And they just never did. I mean, there was a lot of intestinal fortitude from Ole Miss in this game. I mean, obviously Jaemyn Brakefield had the half of his life. I mean, senior night, your last day, you're one of the few guys that was here under Kermit, and you score all 19 of your points in the second half, including the game winner. I mean, what a way to have your last game at the Pavilion. I mean, but it wasn't just him. I mean, there were a lot of just really solid performances. Dre Davis, Malik Dia, Matt Morrell. It seems like everybody that needed to chip in. But I think the thing that I was most impressed with was every time the chips were down, they didn't back down. And when they had that little losing streak there, that wasn't the case. They would get themselves with big holes, and they would, they get themselves out of it, but then they get another big one. They never let themselves fall out of the game, and I think that's really impressive.
Yeah, I mentioned on my reaction show, I'm dubbing that game the Jaemyn Brakefield game. That's the game that kids that were on courtside that stormed fashionably late after the game, we'll just say that. When they're 70 years old, they're going to be talking about the Tennessee game that they saw in college that was the Jaemyn Brakefield game, because you're right, Tennessee would hit a three-point shot, but the thing that really willed them to victory was Jaemyn Brakefield. I think he scored 17 and 19 of Ole Miss's points at one point. And he would listen, I know this is kind of scattershot and everything that's going on, but this second half was a masterclass from Chris Beard. It was everything that Ole Miss fans wanted from Chris Beard. They got in the second half of that game. And part of it was realizing that, hey, if we go small and put Jaemyn Brakefield on their 7-footer, they're not going to be able to guard him in space. And he started working, and it got to the point where it didn't matter who they put on them. The rim was 17 feet wide, and Jaemyn Brakefield was just making everything. But Jaemyn Brakefield, it was nice of him to finally have the game that a Duke transfer was expected to have whenever he got to Ole Miss.
Yeah, Jaemyn's been through a lot since he's been here. He's played a lot of different roles. He's worn a lot of different hats. He was expected to be the superstar, and it kind of up and down for a bit. I feel like, didn't he enter the portal at one point, and then he took himself out? Like, I feel like that was a thing a few years ago where he was like briefly in there again. And obviously, of course, he comes back. He comes off the bench now. Like, he's just had to take so much, and in the moment when they needed him the most, he did exactly what he was supposed to do. I mean, if the only way that it could have been any more poetic is if it was Morrell. I mean, if it had to be one of those two, if it was going to be as perfectly scripted as it was.
Yeah, and the last two games, after the 3-game losing streak, the fan base was down, and justifiably so. But the last 2 games, one thing that nobody is going to talk about because of the performance of certain players, either Padula's shot or Brakefield going off, is there have been perfect inbounds calls for plays run in both of those games that were basically game winner plays. And one was the Morrell play against Oklahoma that got the intentional foul, at the end of the game, 2 free throws that basically put it away. And against Tennessee in this game, one of the better defensive teams in the entire country, with 1 second on the shot clock, you get essentially a layup on an inbounds play. It was absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, listen, this is the reason you brought in Chris Beard. We've talked about it a million times. This is one of the best coaches in college basketball. Right? I mean, there's I don't think anybody can really fight that anymore. He's as good as it gets. The turnaround this program has had in just 2 years is pretty remarkable. And I know it's cliche to say that coaches take on, or players take on the coach's sort of mentality and mantra, but they're all just wired the same way he is in terms of how they want to play and the things that they want to do. It's been a masterclass, and I know that last night kind of seemed like the coronation of it, but man, you've got 2 top 5 wins for the first time ever. I mean, it's in pretty rarefied air, and it's only year 2.
Yeah, and it's at the point where a week ago at this time, everybody's like, Ole Miss is going to make the tournament, but okay, we're just happy to be there. That was the mindset that they were preparing into this tournament. Now they're like, we need to get there, get the matchups, and make some noise.
Yeah, I mean, I'll hand up. A couple weeks ago, I feel like I've gone kind of back and forth on how much noise I thought they could make. If you'd asked me like 2 months ago, I was like, this is a team that makes it to the second weekend. A couple weeks ago, I was like, not sure about that. And now they've had a couple of really impressive games, and now I'm starting to think that maybe they could make it into the second weekend. But I just think that the expectations are and Chris Beard has said it, like, they've never talked about making the tournament. Like, it was never about making the tournament. I think they've always had their eyes on something bigger, and I think there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, and you have some really mature guys. It's an older team. So if you think about it, Michael, the makeup of this team is the perfect recipe that you would want to have as far as the intangibles to make a run in the tournament.
Yeah, I mean, old teams win. I mean, that's I know that it was pretty fashionable to have, especially in the early Calipari days at Kentucky, when you had these really young teams with all the athletes and all that stuff. And, it worked here and there. But I feel like it's kind of gone towards the old, especially with the portal and NIL. You're sort of getting these old teams. And it does seem like older teams are probably going to give themselves a really good chance. And, there aren't, how many teams have 5 1,000-point scores, 6, whatever it is. I mean, there's so many options, and you've had guys that have seen everything, and a coach who has coached in pretty much every situation. I think things bode pretty well.
Thanks again for watching the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. When we come back, we will talk to Michael about the Ole Miss Rebels winning a rebounding competition against a good rebounding team. Stick around for that. So I do want to tell you about FanDuel right now as soon as I bring it up real quick. FanDuel, when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on that action than with FanDuel. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip and you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay on the action. Good as new. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine those bets for a live bet in a same game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, like the final 2 minutes of the Tennessee game, as if it needed some help. They could add that little extra oomph. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch 3, I feel like I never missed my chance. And plus, the app is so super easy to use. When you win, you get paid instantly. So right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So, Michael, Ole Miss actually won a rebounding game. Leading up to that Tennessee game, I was like, okay, Ole Miss just needs to not get obliterated on the boards. Ole Miss needs to keep the rebounding within 10 rebounds. And Ole Miss just goes out and wins the rebounding battle despite playing a good portion of the second half with the tallest player on the floor for Ole Miss being 6'7".
I think one of the crazy things is at halftime, they were down 20-13 in rebounds. They made up all of that ground in the second half without their tallest guy. I mean, that's pretty remarkable, the sort of switcheroo that they did there. And, it's not like they suddenly got taller, bigger players out there. It was the same guys. I think it's hard, it's grit, and it's the mentality. And I think that they really, everything they had to do and everything that I think that at times they've tried to do this year in terms of, they understand that they're not ever going to be the biggest team out there. They have to win the rebounding battles in different ways. This again, we've said masterclass already in this episode, but they did everything that you need to do, especially again against a team that is a very good rebounding team and one of the, if not the best defensive team in the country, with size all over the place. To win that battle is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and one thing that was interesting to me, with Chris Beard and their no middle defense that they like to play, the weak spot for Ole Miss is basically corner threes. That's the reason you'll see in every game they'll shoot a 3-point shot on Ole Miss and there's somebody so wide open they have no chance of getting to it. That's just the flaw in the defense. But Chris Beard has done a decent job recently of scheming up ways to kind of take that away. And in the second half, made it just a little bit more difficult on Tennessee. So they weren't hitting 50% of their threes. They were hitting 30% of their threes. And that allowed you to shoot twos if they were going in and chip away at the leads that kept getting developed.
Yeah, I mean, and in that first half, it seemed like Ziegler was just able to get down the baseline, and he would always find the guy in the corner. And it seemed like they were making all of those threes in the first half. And then in the second half, they were not as easy looks. And again, that's scheming things. I think they hit 12 threes in the first half or something. They did not end up hitting 12 in the second half. I mean, that's scheme. That's changing what you do. And again, I think even on the last, the last play that Tennessee had, it looked like Milicic probably wanted to shoot a three, but they drove him off there, and he had to make a drive to the basket late. So I mean, they really changed things up.
Listen, on that last play, Milicic, the person guarding him was Jaemyn Brakefield. If you want to talk about that, there was enough contact there that kind of made him lose control of the ball for a second. It's not going to go down as a block or anything crazy, but Jaemyn Brakefield got bumped, and a lot of times I've seen Ole Miss players fall down, and that ended up being a layup. He was able to dislodge the ball a little bit, and that was winning basketball.
Yeah, and speaking of winning basketball, when Milicic made that three and hit the free throw, the 4-point play, how many Ole Miss teams would have fallen apart at that point? That's just, those haven't been situations Ole Miss has come up on the right side of a lot. But this is a different team with a different coach and a different mentality. It's a lot of credit to, I know culture is the term that gets thrown around there, but listen, it's true. I mean, this is just a different mindset team right now that was not going to go down that easy. I mean, that would have been a perfect opportunity for probably like 90% of teams in college basketball to just fall apart and be like, okay, well, this is over.
Yeah, it's like, well, it's a good try, guys. It was a good try. We just did something with the top 5 team that you shouldn't have done. We should be in a free throw shooting contest right now, and now it gets weird. Well, today's game against the Florida Gators, listen, I see this going one of two ways, and neither one of them are particularly good for Ole Miss, this being senior day at Florida. There's a chance they could come out really hot, and they could beat Ole Miss by 30 points down at Gainesville after Ole Miss pulled off the win against Tennessee. You're over 500 in the best college basketball conference in the history of college basketball conferences. It's going to be real easy for a team to say, okay, we made it, get ready for the SEC tournament. But I could see Ole Miss playing pretty well and Florida winning a close game, kind of continuing the momentum. I think that's the important thing. Ole Miss just needs to play well. They don't need to turn the ball over. They need to limit runs. They need to run Florida off the 3-point line. The disadvantage that they have down low is probably going to be their undoing, but I think that should be the goal. Just play well. And even if you have to sit people out in this game, if for some reason Matt Morrell gets a little bit better with rest and he sits out, that's fine. But I think playing well, just doing whatever you have to do, not necessarily playing for the W, which is this is not Chris Beard's style. They're going down there to win the game. But I think that is what the fan base should probably be okay with.
I know that, and again, like Chris Beard and any coach is never going to think of it as playing with house money. That's just not how they're wired. They go to win every game. That's why they make the money they do, and why they scheme and all those sorts of things. But listen, you just won a huge game. You set yourself up for a really good position, regardless of what happens in Saturday's game, regardless of what happens in the SEC tournament. You are sitting pretty right now. So. I do agree though that you don't want to see them get run out of the gym, because that's an effort thing, and you don't want to see the effort start to slide this time of year. For a couple of weeks ago, Chris Beard had kind of questioned the toughness and things like that. That seems to have been corrected, and if there's ever a time to correct it, it's in March. You just don't want to lose that edge.
Yeah, and the flip side of the coin is if Ole Miss could find a way to win this game, I mean, the narrative completely around the team would change instantly, overnight.
Yeah, I mean, could you imagine an 11-win SEC Ole Miss team? I mean, that'd be pretty remarkable.
With wins over Florida, Tennessee, and Alabama.
I mean,
two of them on the road.
Yeah, I mean, that would be it'd be pretty incredible. So again, they want to win, but I don't think it's. I think it's more of at least for fans or casual observers, it probably just wants to see them. You hate to do like I just hope everybody plays hard, but you just want to see them play good basketball and make the best of it, regardless of what the circumstance is, whether it's guys sitting, whether it's guys not being 100%, whatever it is. I think you just want to see everybody give their best.
I just hope that everybody has a good time.
I always hope everybody.
So thanks again for watching the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. When we come back, we're going to turn our attention to baseball. We'll probably talk a little bit more about this Florida game today with Michael Katz of the Northeast Mississippi Tupelo Daily Journal. So stick around for that. The Armada Team of the Week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, the Locked On college basketball experts are picking one team that stands apart. From a top-seeded stars to unexpected upsets, these guys showcase strength and sheer power needed to push their team forward. This week's Armada clear-cut Team of the Week are the Houston Cougars. Since joining the Big 12, the Cougars have gone a combined 33-4 in conference game, winning the regular season title by multiple games both years. That's normally a game that Kansas plays. There are no team in college basketball that are more capably embodies the rugged Armada than Kelvin Sampson's squad. Houston's tenacious defense leads the nation in the fewest points allowed per game for the second straight season. And when it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer, and that's exactly what the Houston Cougars have done here. It's clear that our Team of the Week is out there and ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of Nissan's outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. You know, it's kind of funny that before the basketball season started, there's always the super secret scrimmage between Chris Beard and Kelvin Sampson, two defensive guys that kind of like to go out there. And by the way, I heard that Ole Miss won that game this year.
That's if again, it's they're super secretive about those sorts of things, but listen, if whatever happened there, if you do it against Houston, you feel pretty good about your odds because Kelvin Sampson, again, is as good as it gets as far as college basketball. That Houston team is, you know exactly what you're getting from them every year in terms of toughness.
And it was actually a tie game in regulation. So as far as the actual regular, and then they just kind of put in the scrubs to play in overtime, and Ole Miss won the scrub game, the scrub off. Yeah, Ole Miss won that super secret bowl against Houston. And honestly, I want Ole Miss to avoid that game because that feels like it would be the ultimate rock fight, Ole Miss and Houston in a ball game. I do kind of want to see if Ole Miss makes it as a 6 seed, they get a Texas Tech game. I think a second round game against Texas Tech would be hilarious and awesome. For obvious reasons. We've already had the Texas game. Let's go ahead and clear them all out this year. Maybe we can play Little Rock while we're at it and just do the Rolodex of Chris Beard.
Yeah, no, and Texas Tech's pretty nice too. Their head coach, they had the former North Texas coach, I think it is.
He's done Grant McCaslin. Is that his name?
Something like that. Yeah, I think that. Yeah, he's done a remarkable job there.
Yeah,
so
and
that would.
The fact that Texas Tech, and it was basically Bobby Knight, and he decided and turned everything around, and that turned Texas Tech into caring about basketball. And through the Knight years and into the Chris Beard years, they decided to build a new arena over there. And they take it really seriously. You think about Oklahoma State and Kansas and Baylor now, as far as Big 12 basketball. I guess you can count Arizona at this point. It's still weird to think of Arizona as a Big 12 team, but Texas Tech needs to be mentioned in the conversation of those teams.
It's funny you bring up the conference thing. I was watching, because I'm a sicko, Cal and Georgia Tech was on a couple weeks ago. I was like, what a weird time for a non-conference game. I was like, oh no, this is just the ACC now. So listen,
Cal and Stanford should not be allowed to charge for education right now. They shouldn't. Whenever you're going to charge somebody $50,000 a year or more to go to college and then play in the Atlantic Coast Conference with other teams on the Atlantic Coast, I just don't think you can charge people for an education to that point.
Them and SMU, just I don't get it. I don't know how sustainable the current situation is. Let's just say that.
I think everything's going to change in 2030, personally. I mean, we're just kind of spitballing. Whenever Florida State and Clemson set up that right, and they did that, and everything kind of feels that way, it feels like a major restructuring is coming in 2030. So anybody that likes college football the way it was, take this close facsimile for the next 4 years or so, because I think everything is going to change in 2030.
I think there comes a point when, there's a lot of grandiose ideas that have come out in the last few years and a lot of change and things. And then I feel like eventually you get to a point where people realize maybe the change wasn't as great as we thought it was. And there are some logistical problems with all of these things, and people are still mad, and there's still the same problems we had before. Maybe we run it back. So again, it's famous last words that it's going to go back, but I do think that what it is right now seems pretty it does not seem sustainable.
Yeah, I think there's going to be essentially the ACC and the Big 12 are going to merge. I think that's the end game of what's going to happen, and there's going to be 3 super conferences because a merged ACC and Big 12, a Big 10, and an SEC, and they are probably going to run college sports as it goes on. It's not going to be the same thing, but with a merged ACC and a Big 12, you get Arizona and Arizona State and those teams back to where Stanford and Cal are not just on an island.
I do love the idea. I mean, if we're talking basketball, Arizona and Duke and Arizona, North Carolina, that'd be pretty great.
Yeah. And the Big 12 probably sees that basketball is an avenue forward for them. But whenever that gets merged, there's a chance that North Carolina goes off to the Big 10, and all of that is possible as well. Anyway, thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day when we're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My dog Archie is losing his mind in the background right now. Anyway, I hope everybody has a good time. What do you have going on at the Daily Journal right now, man?
A lot of basketball, a lot of baseball. It is the peak of crossover season, so a lot of coverage on a lot of everything right now.
All right, well, thank you for coming on, and we'll talk to you next week, bud.
Appreciate you, bud.